This is Eat, Sleep, Invest, the marketing podcast for real estate investors to get more deals. Hey, welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Eat, Sleep, and Invest. I'm your host, Brian Driscoll. I'm here with Kim Lisa Taylor. Hey, what's going on, Kim?
Hey, thanks for inviting me.
Hey, thanks for coming on. Yeah, so this is going to be an interesting episode. So, Kim, give a little bit of background on what areas you specialize in, what you do.
So I'm a corporate securities attorney. Our firm, Syndication Attorneys, helps real estate entrepreneurs who are raising money from private investors. We help them set up their legal documents, prepare professional marketing materials for them to use with their investors, and then also we have a huge educational library and a book and all kinds of stuff we can use to help educate syndicators so they know how to do it correctly and legally.
Okay. So now, do you help people that are raising private money just for single deals? Or is it more like the really big, like 200 unit type of things?
All of the above. If people are doing small deals or they're going to be raising, $400,000 or less, then usually we're going to be structuring that as some kind of a joint venture or setting it up so they can use like the same offering documents over and over again. If people are buying bigger 200 unit apartment complexes, they're usually doing what we call a specified offering. And then sometimes we'll do funds where people are raising, 20 to 50 or $100 million to go out and buy a bunch of deals.
Okay. So there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's discuss what's a private investor?
It's ordinary people, right? People people with jobs and some savings, other people that you meet at real estate events that don't want to be actively involved in finding deals and running deals, but they want to passive invest as part of a group.
Okay.
Yeah. The SEC calls them retail investors.
Retail investors. Okay. Because that's what I deal with a lot of real estate investors, and they have the private money, things like that. And it's a doctor, the lawyer that want to get involved with real estate. They just don't want to actively be involved. So anyone thinking private investor, that's your buddy. That's
right. So it's somebody who's not in the business of, holding themselves out to be a lender, hard money lender or a private lender. These are just people that, wouldn't otherwise think of doing it except for the fact that they know you and they want to invest with you. So
now are there, so say I'm an investor and I have someone that wants to give me money, invest in a property. Am I liable for specific things there? I know obviously like most guys will put them onto the mortgage, things like that, but are there things that the investor needs to protect himself and also that the private money guy needs to protect? Like explain to me that whole process there. Not just
sure. Right? So if people are selling interest in a company, which is most typically what they do, or they could be issuing promissory notes in exchange for somebody's money. So, they want to say, I'll offer you 8% fixed interest for a 3-year note. And that would be a scenario where they have a promissory note. If they wanted to bring investors into their company, then they would structure it in such a way that they would sell us some of the interest to investors, and the investors would put up 100% of the money. And, so maybe investors buy 70% of the company, but then they get to share in the profits. Usually there's some kind of a 70-30 split, or there could be some kind of a preferred return, what we call a waterfall. So when there's cash that's left over after paying all the operating expenses of the property and paying the loan payments and keeping some money in reserves, then we call that distributable cash. And so whenever there's cash to distribute, it follows this waterfall that we've set out that says, okay, first it goes to the investors here until they get something, and then it goes to the management, and then there's a split. So it's usually something like that.
Okay, so initially when people start getting involved with a private investor, they should talk with someone like you to get the proper paperwork set up and all expectations.
So there's really kind of two parts to it. There's the structure, which is what we just talked about. So what is it that they're offering investors? That's the corporate part. The securities compliance part is what do they have to do to comply with securities laws in order to be able to do this? So if somebody's repeatedly selling promissory notes to sustain a business, or if they're selling passive interest to investors in their company, then they're selling securities, and they have to follow securities laws, which means they either have to get pre-approval from regulators, that's called registering, or they have to qualify for an exemption from registration. And for each exemption, there's a specific set of rules they have to follow, and they have to document how they followed these rules in case they're ever questioned about it. So they can prove, just like an IRS tax deduction, they can prove they're entitled to that exemption because they followed this specific set of rules. So that's what we help them with, is help them decide what's the right exemption, and what rules they have to follow, and how they can document all of that process.
Okay, and you're talking about securities like the SEC, right?
That's right, Securities and Exchange Commission, but there's also, every state has its own securities division. So it's not just the SEC, that's the federal regulatory agency, but the states also can enforce against people who are unscrupulously taking money from people and not following the rules.
Okay, so even the people just doing the small deals, borrowing from their attorney or their doctor or anything, or even a buddy, they have to make sure they're in compliance, right?
Yeah, if you're just doing a one-off thing and you're borrowing from your buddy or your family or something like that, that's not really what they're looking at. What they're looking at are people who are building a business around this model, where they're going to be repeatedly doing the same thing, or they're putting together a group and they're raising, $1 million, $2 million from a group of passive investors. So that's really when the securities laws are kicking in.
Okay, and then what's a security? Is that just the money?
No, a security is the legal instrument, so the legal document and promise that's being made to entice somebody to invest. So in the case of promissory note, they're getting a promissory note that says, I promise to pay, at this specific, date and time, and, eventually all the money's going to be due. So it has all the terms of the offer in the promissory note. For someone who's selling interest in their company, they're going to have an operating agreement that says, here's what has to happen before we're going to distribute cash. And then when it does, this is how it's going to go. And, here's some fees that we're going to earn as managers for doing all this on your behalf.
Okay, cool. What made you get into this line of work?
I was doing the real estate and environmental litigation prior to this, and just really didn't have the mentality to be a litigator. Decided, that I really like putting deals together versus tearing them apart. And so just started doing this back in 2007.
Yeah, because that's really interesting, because what you're doing is finding out ways that people can make deals happen. Like that.
Exactly. Yeah.
So important.
Yeah. And my favorite part is helping them figure out how to do it and how to structure it with their investors, so that it's fair for everybody, for the management who's doing a lot of extra effort and sweat equity to get these deals to happen, as well as fair for the investors and their expectations.
Now, what are some mistakes you see? We'll say, number one, from the real estate investor's side, but then also from someone just trying to start lending money. They have extra cash in their bank. What are some mistakes you see that those guys are doing or should look out for?
You really want to know who you're investing with, and at the very least do a Google search, but don't just look at page 1 of the Google pages, because if somebody has complaints, they'll hire a reputation manager that will start saying a bunch of good things about them and pushing all the bad things towards the page 4 or 5. So just look beyond page 1 to see if there's anything about that person out there. And try to find out who all the members of the management team that are involved in this. Usually there's anywhere from 2 to 5 people. Find out who they are and make sure you know them. Have some conversations with them. Make sure you like what they're doing. You can always ask to talk to some of their other investors. I've had people, clients who've actually had their investors call me and ask for references. What do you know about these people? How long have you been working with them? That kind of stuff. So make sure that they've got a track record. So make sure they're good people. Make sure they have a track record that they've actually done this before. If you know somebody who's getting into a new business, you might be excited about it. And you're saying, hey, I've seen this guy succeed in a bunch of things, so I'll go ahead and invest with him. That's okay if you know that person. But if you don't know them, you want to make sure they've got a track record doing what they're asking you to participate in now. So if they're buying multifamily, how many have they done before? Those are really the critical factors that are going to determine how successful this project is going to be. And, there's always room for things to go wrong, right? We couldn't predict these interest rate hikes. We couldn't predict COVID. We couldn't predict the 2008 meltdown. There's things that do happen that are beyond the control of the people the syndicators that put these groups together. But for the most part, they're pretty savvy and pretty well in tune with what's going on in the marketplace and trying to mitigate those risks.
Yeah, and that's a really good point too, because there's a lot of shiny objects with real estate, like all the different types of people out there. So definitely do your due diligence and make sure that these people, because you're giving them a lot of money, make sure that they've actually have experience in this and it's not just a new venture. Like,
Yeah, how long have they been doing it, and how did they learn how to do it? Just talk to them about their background and make sure that you feel comfortable with it.
now, what do you see from the real estate investor side, mistakes that they're making when approaching people to try to raise capital and then also doing the deal?
Well, there's a lot of people that don't understand securities laws, so they either, don't know, don't care, in denial. We have a saying, there's 4 kinds of people that don't follow securities laws: those that don't know, don't care, in denial, or in jail. And, so you want to make sure that you understand securities laws, so you understand what they have to be doing in order to legally invite you into their deals. Because somebody who's doing an illegal offering is putting the entire offering at risk. If they get called out by a regulator, or another investor sues or something like that, they're going to suspend your distributions and use your money to pay their legal fees. So you want to make sure that they, first of all, are doing it legally. One of the ways you can read my book. There's a chapter. The last chapter is devoted to passive investors, just to make sure that you understand what you should be looking for but all the other chapters are about what these people should be doing. So if you read it, you'll have a better understanding of what to look for in their offering docs. There should be a very prescribed set of offering documents, a disclosure document that describes all the risks, a subscription document where the investor gets to certify that they've understand the risks and can afford to lose the money. And then we're looking for this investment contract, which is just going to be the operating agreement, or the promissory note that's going to be the contractual agreement between the investor and the sponsor or the syndicator.
Okay. Now, what's an exempt offering?
So that just means that when you're selling securities, so once we've determined you're either selling promissory notes or you're selling passive interests in a company, those are called investment contracts. So when somebody has they're offering an investment of money in a common enterprise with an expectation of profits based solely on the efforts of the promoter, that's called an investment contract. So then we know investment contracts are listed in the definition of securities. So notes or investment contracts are the typical thing that people are selling in the real estate realm. And so once we know they're selling securities, then that triggers having to comply with securities offering rules, which number one is you either have to register the offering, which is getting pre-approval from regulators, or you have to qualify for the exemption. And to qualify for the exemption, you got to figure out what exemptions there are that apply to your offering. The way to do that is to talk to a corporate securities attorney who's going to help you understand, based on what you're trying to accomplish, where the property is, where you are, where all the investors are. We'll ask you a few targeted questions, and once we know the answers to that, we can say, first of all, you're not going to want to register a real estate offering because it's going to take too long. It's going to take, 6 months or a year to get it approved, and it's going to take, piles of money, and you don't have that time when you've got a deal under contract. So you're going to have to follow an exemption. So based on what you tell us during our initial interview, we'll be able to figure out which exemption is appropriate for you. Most of our clients start out with Regulation D Rule 506B, and that's a federal exemption that allows you to raise money from an unlimited number of accredited investors, up to 35 non-accredited but sophisticated investors, but you can't find it through any means of general advertising or solicitation. The way to prove that you didn't advertise or solicit is to be able to demonstrate that you had a pre-existing substantive relationship with those people that predated your offering. And then the substantive part means you have to have had a conversation with them about their financial suitability to be in your offerings. Are they accredited? Are they sophisticated? Have they invested in other stuff before? You're going to hold property for 5 to 7 years. Is that going to work for them? And, here's the kinds of return you're offering. Is that within their investment guidelines for their own investment guidelines? So that's the most common exemption. 506C, Regulation D Rule 506C is another very common exemption that we write offerings for. And that one is, it still allows an unlimited amount of money to be raised, but does allow the syndicator to advertise freely. But the only people that can invest in that are people who are verified accredited investors. So they actually have to go through a verification process to prove that they either have the net worth or the income requirements to be an accredited investor. And so every state has its own set of rules. So if somebody wanted to do an offering that was all contained within one state where they were, where the property was, where all the investors were, then they could follow an intrastate offering rule for that specific state.
Okay, so there's a lot that goes into it. Now, an accredited investor, number one, is that a specific thing from the SEC that says, okay, this person, elaborate, tell me like an accredited investor. What exactly is
accredited investor, there's 12 definitions of an accredited investor, but the most common ones that our clients use are the ones that pertain to individuals. And that's any individual that has over $1 million net worth, excluding equity in their primary residence, or they make over $200,000 a year if they're single, or $300,000 a year if they're married or married equivalent, meaning sharing an address. So in any of those situations, that would qualify as accredited. Everybody else is non-accredited. The only time there's a verification process required is if you're investing in a Reg D Rule 506C advertised offering. If you're investing in a Reg D Rule 506B offering, the investors can self-certify. So they read those definitions and they attest under penalty of perjury on their own that, yep, I meet these definitions and I'm an accredited investor.
Okay, and who comes up with the rules on what's accredited? Is that the SEC that lists it?
That's the SEC, and then the states typically adopt those same rules.
Okay, so depending on what kind of offering, they can either do it themselves, say, yep, I meet those requirements, or they have to go through the process.
That's right.
Now, that's interesting also. So different ways that you do your offering, it's kind of hard to raise money if you can't advertise, wouldn't you think? Or
a lot of people know a lot of people with money, right? Or they develop relationships with people. Most of my clients have people in their world that are not accredited, but would be fine investors. You don't have to have $1 million net worth to have, $50,000 or $100,000 that you'd like to invest in real estate, right? Or maybe even $500,000 that you'd like to invest in real estate. So you have to, kind of gauge who your audience is and who do you already know. And if people are just starting out and this is their first or second offering and they haven't done it before, then the people most likely to invest with them are people that they already know and who've already seen them be successful in other endeavors.
That makes sense. Now you're saying there's different ways that you can do your offerings. One that you can advertise, one you can't advertise. Like, why would someone choose one that they can't advertise over the other one?
Well, because it cuts out about 90% of the investing public. Because the estimate by the SEC is that about only 10% of investors out there are accredited investors. So you're going to cut out all your family and friends and people that that don't meet that definition of accredited, and now you got to go out to a group of strangers. Well, if you haven't already built a track record, it's going to be hard to get those people to invest with you because they don't know you, and they haven't seen you succeed in other things. Whereas your family and friends who would be happy to invest with you, are kind of cut out of those advertised deals.
I got you. So you're saying the ones you can advertise, just in basic words, you have to get accredited investors. The other one, some have to be, but some don't have to be. And
that's right.
You don't have to go through the process.
And it's all about track record, right? It's once you have a track record and you've done 5 or 6 deals and they've been successful with investors, now you could be able to advertise, because the first thing that a stranger is going to ask is, how many have you done before? Right. And
right.
So, and another way that people can gain credibility, so these sponsors or syndicators can bring people under their team that have that kind of experience. And that way, when someone asks, how many have you done before? You say, well, our management team has this experience, or we have people on our management team that have, 1,500 units. So that's kind of how you overcome that objection. And also gain experience by, bringing these people onto your team to be mentors to the team. And now your team gains that experience.
Now, can you help people all across the U.S., or is it state-specific?
Nope. We're doing offerings under Reg D Rule 506B or C. Those are federal offerings. We're able to help people in any state with those specific offerings. I am licensed in California and Florida. I've got other attorneys in my firm that are licensed in Florida and Louisiana.
And you said you have a book on your website. How do people get access to that? Where would they go?
Yeah, so there's you can buy it on Amazon, or you can get a digital copy that you can view on your computer at our website for free. The book is called How to Legally Raise Private Money. and it's an Amazon #1 bestseller. It's been out since 2019. If you want the digital copy, you can go to syndicationattorneys.com, and there's a tab there that says free book, and you can go ahead and start reading that today.
Okay, good. What's the best way for people to connect with you if they're thinking about raising money and want some help?
Yeah, go to our website, syndicationattorneys.com. There's a schedule a consultation button. If you click on that, you're going to get some options. You'll be able to decide which one is right for you, and we'll be happy to talk to you.
Okay. Hey, well, thanks for coming on. We appreciate it. It's a lot of information there.
Yeah, happy to. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, everyone listening, if you're thinking about raising money, reach out to Kim, because there are a lot of things you don't know what you don't know. So
Right.
It's worth a phone call.
Okay.
All right. Hey, well, thanks for coming, Kim. We appreciate you.
All right. Thank you.
Get out there, crush it, and close some deals.